You're listening to Off the Ball Breakfast,
Ireland's sports breakfast show.
That Cork atmosphere obviously helped you guys a lot in that first half against England. I mean, keeping England to just one try, 2 points in at half time was an incredible performance. What work on from that second half are you taking into Wales? Because obviously that's where the emotional piece kind of fell off a little bit, and the differences sort of came out.
Yeah, do you know what? Interestingly, we've looked at the game, felt the game got away from us in the first half. The second half is obvious. It's obvious when we're behind and the wheels come off it. It's the first half that we put ourselves in the position for the second half. So we've gone after bits. If we want to compete with World Cup contenders and we want to go deeper into games, we want to cause more problems. We looked at how that game could have been 15, 17-0 at half time. So the bits of detail that we missed in the first half put us in a position that England managed to get a score and were able to move away from us and go through the gears in the second half. So, look, it's not just about looking at the second half. We've gone pretty hard at the first half. Because if we get that bit right, and we're 15, 17-0 at half-time, what does that team talk look like at half-time for the other changing room? What does the game feel like when you come out after that? So there's bits of learning, not just from the end, except that's clear and obvious, but around bits that we could have had more scoreboard pressure in that first block.
The Ireland head coach Scott Beamond there speaking during the week, of course, ahead of the Guinness Women's Six Nations clash between Wales and Ireland this Sunday afternoon. 3 p.m. is the kick-off time for that one. Hannah O'Connor, delighted to say, is with us in studio. Morning, Hannah.
Morning, lads. How are we?
Thanks for coming in. Keeping well. Looking forward to this one. I suppose before we look forward, we look back. And that defeat against England, 49-5, which on the face of it seems like a drubbing, but that was far from the tail of the tape, because for large portions of that first half, 35-40 minutes, Ireland were well in that game.
Yeah, and I think that was the most pleasing thing, that they were so well in that game within those first 40 minutes. That in previous years, I know a couple of years ago we went over to, probably 3 years ago now, went over to Leicester and it was 10-0 at half time, but we were hanging on and surviving in that. Whereas in that first 40 minutes, Ireland really fired shots, scored first, and deservedly so. And you heard Scott Beamon talk about there that, you know, that first half could have gone a different way completely, in the sense that Ireland could have taken more opportunities and scored more, and then, you know, it looks a lot different going into half time. So they'll have really analysed that first half. But yeah, it's not reflective of kind of the game itself, but definitely the girls will be looking at that, kind of building on that kind of 45-minute performance that they had and putting it all together then this Sunday against Wales, which would be huge for them.
When you think about the ambitions at the start of the Six Nations, I guess, Hannah, it was to close the gap to the top two. It was to get 3 wins. Still on course for that. Has that gap closed in your view, and in what we've seen so far? Yeah,
I definitely think so. And I think off the back of the WXV1 performance that they've put in, or the performances that they put in over there, it was about bridging that gap further away from the likes of the Italy, Scotland and Wales, and making it very, very obvious, which I think they did against Italy with that performance that they put in and playing right up until the 82nd minute. France, we saw that they closed the gap even further. They'll be really frustrated probably with how that one ended in terms of what could have been against them. England, we saw those shoots again of what can be against the top tier team, arguably the best team in the world there. But again, none of that matters unless they can back it up again this weekend against Wales and show that the gap is definitely there, and the likes of the Italy performance, or even like that first half against England, wasn't just a flash in the pan, that they must be able to build on it and kind of go again this weekend.
What were the main positives that you saw last weekend?
I think Ireland's ability to kind of maintain that composure in the pressure. I think that's what we've lacked against the likes of the England over the last few years, that they will just suffocate us and they will make you deviate away from your own game plan and your own style of pattern and play, and yet you can hardly fire any shots against them over the last few years. We've been like, our score, like that's the first try, Amy Lee Costigan's score being the first try that we've actually scored ourselves over the last 6 years, which is kind of a scary stat.
It's mad
in itself, one that I didn't know about till the time, which makes it a bit more depressing. But that other scores have come from penalty tries or kicks, that, you know, being able to kind of live in those moments and take your chances, I suppose will stand to them massively. Against a buoyed Wales team who are coming under, you know, new management with Sean Lynn taking over. They're almost an unknown quantity because you don't know what they're going to bring. They've got a few players coming back from injury as well. So the thing that Ireland will be taking away is, you know, the composure that they had against the likes of the England under that pressure, but they must be able to do it now this weekend again against a slightly lesser opposition in Wales.
Sorry, go ahead, Keith.
We played Wales this time last year, if my mind is correct, and we beat them 36-5.
Yeah, down in Cork.
Have we improved? Have Wales improved? what you expect.
Yeah, definitely. It's a different journey, I suppose, that both teams are on. You look at Wales and they're probably where we were a couple of years ago in terms of kind of down in the doldrums, kind of making their way back up from it. I think having someone like Sean Lynn come in from Gloucester has been a huge asset to them. He knows those players really well, and being involved in the Prem, he knows what it takes to coach in women's rugby and the strengths that Welsh team has. He'll be building a massive part on their culture and what goes behind them, which is probably something they've been lacking over the last while. Like, there was a very damp squib for them last year, as you said, when they came to Cork. They really didn't fire any shots, but Ireland likewise that day were excellent. So they'll be hurting from that one. They'll remember that one for sure. And when you bring them over into their home patch as well, it adds a next, kind of level to it. But we are, I think, in a different place to them in terms of where we are on that upward trajectory, being able to play in the WXV1s, which they didn't do. They're at the lower level of it. They are building in a different phase, so they'll very much be looking at taking these games as kind of building towards the World Cup, but also they won't want to be finishing with that wooden spoon either. So it adds another dynamic to it, probably where we were a couple of years ago, and nobody wants to end up with that wooden spoon. So that will add certainly fuel to the fire for them.
You've been in a Scott Beeman camp during the Six Nations. What will that camp have looked like this week after a big loss like that? Is it fairly positive? He comes across like a very positive, taking the positives from a loss kind of coach. What would it have looked like this week? Yeah,
it's very much turning the page. I think the benefit to this, it is like almost like a mini World Cup scenario, because they have these 3 games kind of coming, kind of bang, one after the other, 1, 2, 3. That's what they'll have to get used to coming when World Cup rolls around. So that will be, I'd say, something he will focus on in terms of a positive. He is very much a detail-orientated coach, which is great for the girls, because really, as you heard him talk about there, he'll focus in on that first half and the things that we could have got after more, and turn it into that kind of constructive positive of what we can work on. So I think it's a benefit for the girls in the sense that they've got another game. I think in previous years gone by, we've played England second last, and we've had to kind of almost not limp into, but roll into Scotland, where we haven't performed to our best over the last few years, sometimes limping across the line against them. So it's a real chance to turn the page and flick a switch and say, like, okay, we can bounce back from this and show that where we're really at, and that the Italy game is our benchmark, and the stuff that they did really well in that Italy game and the stuff that they did well in the English game is the benchmark, and the bar isn't going to drop below that. So he will be very much focusing on, very big on your preview and your review, but he'll be able to pinpoint parts of the Welsh game to really flick that mindset for the girls, and it'll be very kind of detail driven approach. So it's quite easy to flick the switch when you have that level of kind of preview and review coming at you, to be able to go again this weekend. So yeah, I'd say the girls would bounce back really well from it. I'd back them fully to do that.
One of the big negatives from the game is obviously the news of Erin King's injury from yesterday. She's out for the rest of Six Nations and the World Cup later this year. How massive a loss is that for Ireland? Yeah,
it's huge. I think like she's shown her ability, and the crossover she's brought back from sevens and what she's brought to the squad. I think her stats speak for themselves, and I know Tanya Rosser was chatting about it with you during the week as well, that like her stats are off the chart in terms of her work rate and the level of work she gets through for you in a game. She's part of that really dynamic back row at the moment, which seems to be their kind of mainstays with Brittany Hogan and Aoife Wafer. It's a fairly awesome trio to have as your back row in terms of the level of work that they get through, both on attack and defence. So she will be a massive loss, especially in the line-out. She's going to be your go-to banker ball when things have been under pressure, such as the ability for her to kind of climb highest. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of fill that void that's going to be left by her, but it gives somebody else a chance to step up. I think Adele McMahon is back on track to get back from injury as well, which would be a big boost for them in terms of having her leadership on the pitch. But I think something like that can kind of galvanise the team as well in a week like this, that you're almost doing it for her, and you're going out with that attitude that you don't know when your last time to throw on a jersey or when an injury could hit you like that. So it kind of gives a reality check to everybody in terms of how lucky you are to be doing it. So
I think we've a clip here of Scott Beeman referencing that Erin King injury. So let's hear what the head coach had to say about that injury news.
Look, for a young player who's still got the world at her feet and has come in to our programme, and we took her to WXV and stuff she's done at the start of this competition. We're gutted for her, gutted to miss out on having her available and bouncing around the pitch. For us, it's rugby can happen, doesn't it? And sometimes it deals you tough hands, and fair play. Her attitude to it is right. I'm going to come back better. So she's already looking at coming back. She's already looking at the big picture piece around where she can add to a game. But look, we'll undoubtedly miss her. Yeah, well, I mean, it's quite an unusual injury to some degree, and she's like, well, I wasn't going to stop. So she's she's full of bounce. She's full of grit and endeavour. She told me she never missed a session before. So this is sort of the first time she's had an injury. And look, as we know, professional sport can sometimes deal you a hand. But already she's got great people in and around her. People are looking after her. People will recover her. Will rehabilitate her. And already she's looking at areas that she can add to her game.
Yeah, it's cruel. It's cruel for such a young player to be missing a World Cup as well, Hannah. And like, the nature of the injury, just and I think she had surgery in Dublin, or was due to have surgery certainly yesterday, and then begin her rehab. But as you say, like, her importance to the line-out is one thing as well. And the scrum and the line-out were two areas where Ireland, you would say, probably need serious improvement.
Yeah, especially just off the back of last week. I think the first two games, you know, they had great stats up in the 90s for both the completion and those. And again, you're only as good as your last performance. So the girls will be looking to bounce back and bring back the strengths from that game that we'd seen in the Italy and then the French game, because they can do it. It's just those minute details that when you're put under the severest of pressure, like England doing a line out, you know, they'll learn a lot from that. And the same from the scrum point of view. We chatted about it on Monday. I know there'll be a lot of learnings taken from that, and they will be able to kind of flick that switch, you know, very quickly. But yeah, it's going to be definitely needed against a very physical Wales outfit who pride themselves in their set piece as well, and have some big units in there as well.
So that leaves Ireland with a massive hole in that back row. We're not short of options this year. Our depth's actually quite strong. Who do you reckon, if I was to ask you for three different players that could slot in there for Erin King?
It's definitely an interesting one. Obviously, having, like as we said there, Del McMahon coming back from injury would be your kind of natural fit there in terms of her leadership in the pack as well that she'll bring as captain. So hopefully she's ticking along on course from her injury. So she's, you know, you could slot her straight in there and like for like. Obviously, similar kind of, you know, in terms of what she goes after in the breakdown and her work rate throughout the game. You've also got the likes of Claire Bowles. I know Scott Beeman referenced as well as how well she's training, and you know, she has great experience in the 15s game as well. Hasn't played there in 15s probably for Ireland in a few years, but has been ticking along and was captain in the Celtic Challenge as well, so has plenty of experience there in back row. You've also got Dervla Nicavord, who probably is another one who could go in there in terms of that kind of workhorse. Had played at the weekend with her club as well, so got her minutes up there. But you could also do something totally different in terms of slotting the likes of Dorothy Rowe, who is Dorothy Wall, who is a natural kind of back rower as well before she swapped over to second row. Could slot her back and put someone else into the second row. So there's a few options there, and Scott definitely likes to keep people on their toes, so you wouldn't know what would happen there, but a few options for sure. But I think, like you said, line out will be an area that you'll need to put someone in there who is able to kind of match what Ireland have been doing, to not kind of change things too much in that department.
How do you keep the girls motivated for this? Because without being too harsh, we're going into the Six Nations and we're not really there to win it. We're probably not, we're not going to get the wooden spoon. So how do you keep the girls interested when you're not at the top and you're not at the bottom? You're just middle of the road.
Yeah, I suppose it's new territory for us though. Like as I said, a couple of years ago, we were trying to avoid that wooden spoon. So motivation will not be lacking. As I said, when you get a chance to put on, the green jersey and get to represent your country, the competition, not only in the back row but for places in general, is ferocious. Like, so, whereas eyes will solely be on the Six Nations and finishing as best as we can, and as we said, putting that push away from us, from the likes of the Scotland, Wales and Italy, and driving on, see how close, like you're constantly chasing gains, you're chasing to see how close can we get to the likes of the Frances and the Englands, but also you're looking towards then the bigger picture of a World Cup year. You're seeing how big your performance is, you can put it against them, to how close we can get. So when it comes to the running of a World Cup, how far we can push it, how big a contenders we can be for it. Because as I said, the girls will back themselves fully in the confidence that Scott and the coaching ticket that's been put in place there to give them, the confidence will be riding high in terms of all the cogs that are there in place. So it's about kind of putting in performances week on week that give you that bit of more confidence going into such a big competition like a World Cup. So yeah, motivation won't be lacking for sure. I know, whereas we mightn't feel like we can win the competition outright with the likes of an England there, it's definitely a lot to be chased in terms of the other little gains here and there heading into a big World Cup year.
Would you find that, Keith, as well, international level, where, same in football I presume as well, where you obviously want to win the games at international level, but you're also competing for a jersey, and you're thinking about the upcoming games, and there's not many international windows across the calendar year, so you have to think about yourself as well as the big picture.
Yeah, it's very difficult, but I take the point that when you play for Ireland, that your motivation should be always there. I just think it's a hard mindset to have when you're not really going to win the tournament, you're not really in trouble of getting the wooden spoon, and we can say it's all about improvement. I think that's a very difficult message for the player to stick with, especially if we got beat by England, we got beat by France. You're looking over your shoulder, there's not much coming, and you can't really catch the people ahead. I just think it's difficult, but that's where it comes from the management. It comes down to the players, how professional they're going to be, and where the motivation comes from. But I think that's half the battle of being a professional, isn't it? Getting yourself up for games.
Yeah, definitely won't be lacking with the girls, as you said. Whereas they won't be looking towards it at the moment in terms of the World Cup, and they'll be focused on Six Nations. That's essentially every time you get a chance to put on the jersey, it's yours there, for the keeping. Can you keep hold of it until the next game? And as I said, Scott has shown over the last couple of years that whereas we've been kind of the same 15 who've been heading out week on week, by a couple of changes, anything can happen. You can have someone come in and just take the jersey underneath you, and no one wants to be falling down the pecking order, especially with the World Cup creeping around the corner. So motivation will be massively high on that front. It's an exciting year for the 15s game, so there's plenty to play for. Whereas it might be winning of the competition, how big can we go in terms of the layering on from last year, from Six Nations last year, from the WXV ones last year? Just that whole confidence piece is to be riding high with that level of confidence heading into a World Cup would be something else to be taken.
It seems like a seriously healthy environment. There's obviously that motivation of the World Cup this year and all that, but every player in there seems to really be enjoying themselves in that camp.
Yeah.
You can probably attest to that from last year.
Yeah, it's a big flick of the switch, I think, coming from the kind of the depths of where we were a couple of years ago. And I know we referenced about Wales kind of coming out of their slump as well a little bit in terms of being down in the depths of it in terms of performances and stuff. We've been there. We know what it's like. And so I think when Scott Beeman came in and Sean Ryan as well, the girls will have referenced as well as someone who has been big on building the culture. And that's something that, you hear talked about in sport in terms of talk about a Man United, the dressing room and stuff and the atmosphere between players. It can be lip service a lot of the time in terms of, what you're talking about, but what has gone on within that backroom team and rebuilding after the failures of qualifying for the last World Cup, it's been a big building phase for it. And especially I think since Dubai and the WXV3 that the girls were in, it's been going on since then, since that group came in, and it's a big emphasis put on it, a big emphasis with kind of the culture that's there and the friendships that are there between the girls. And it's it's easier said than done, but that comes through spending time together, enjoying each other's company. But it's very much, you'll hear the girls reference it as well, a kind of a supportive kind of feedback group, that you're not whereas I could be competing with you for a jersey, it's very much we can help each other to get better, and the best person gets it in that peer feedback, which is something you don't often get and don't always get in international teams, where you're a lot of the time it's scrapping at each other's throats for the spots, and you mightn't necessarily be best friends with the person who's in your position, but you can see it and you can feel it when you're in there, that the kind of the camaraderie is there, and everybody is only wanting the betterment of the person in that jersey. And if it's you and you've earned the right to do it, so be it. But if not, that you're building up kind of everybody else who's there, and that's a hard thing to get. It's not easy, but that kind of flick of the switch has been building over the last 2 years, and it's something that's really embedded in there. They've had a buddy system in place where when you'd come into the squad, first of all, and everybody would have a buddy. So your buddy would be kind of responsible for looking out for you and making sure that everything is kind of aligned and that you're doing well, and that someone just to check in on you. It seems like a little kind of teeny thing, or a kind of a funny thing, but when you kind of piece it all together and put it together with that kind of fun element of different games and different, the crack committee are kind of in full force, it does add to the whole picture of kind of, when you go out there on the pitch, who you're doing it for. You're doing it for yourself and for your family and for your friends and for your country, but you're doing it for the 14 other girls that are standing beside you. So it does all create that kind of that close-knit bond. And you hear the girls reference it the whole time about the group that's there and the enjoyment that they have in spending time in each other's company. It's a bit like what you hear with the men's team and what they talk about in terms of the camp with Andy Farrell and the dynamic that's set there. It's very similar to that. And, the girls are kind of showing every sign of it on the pitch in those performances, from 1 to 23, and even more that people who aren't involved in it, that kind of dynamic is there, and it pays service on the pitch. Then you see it in the performances. So yeah, it bodes well kind of going forward and for what's to come.
You were smirking there thinking about your buddies that you had across the years.
Very few buddies I had over the years. I was just wondering, do the women get much interaction with the men? Because with the men being so good, like one of the best countries in the world at rugby, it would seem natural to go and mix with the men and learn from them.
Yeah, and to be fair, the lads would be very good in there. There's an overlap, I suppose, because of the separate windows for the two competitions with the men's Six Nations. There's a little bit of overlap at the end when we would go into camp and the men would still be finishing up camp in terms of their last probably 2 games. So there is that overlap in terms of that. But yeah, I know it's happened before where some of the front rows have picked the front rows and the men's team's brains for things, and the lads would be very good like that in terms of being open to those chats and stuff around the HPC. So yeah, it's something that has definitely kind of crept in over the last few years post-COVID. And and something that I know with the likes of Johnny Sexton being integrated into that coaching ticket as well makes for an interesting dynamic as well. So I think it'll only continue to grow. But as you said, like men's team, one of the best teams in the world. So why not pick their brains for it? So yeah, it's something that definitely can, I suppose, looking into the World Cup as well, it's definitely something I think they'll be looking to pick apart a little bit more.
What do you make of the Johnny Sexton stuff? So obviously going full time with Ireland, but also getting drafted in as a Lions coach as well. Fairly interesting news. I probably didn't expect it this early in Sexton's coaching career, but it's
I know, yeah.
step.
I suppose it shows that the kind of the caliber or where the respect that they have for him and that. But yeah, as you said, fairly early in his coaching career, I did think he would struggle to make the switch and go cold turkey away from it. So it's not surprising to see him straight back in there. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see, I suppose, from the women's point of view. I heard about Scott Beeman talking about it, not kind of really sure of what it'll entail yet. But they have obviously Gareth Steenson in there in terms of the kicking piece, which has been really beneficial to all the kickers on the team and given that kind of level of coaching. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see like what Johnny's been there, done that in terms of all the big competitions and what he's achieved in rugby. So yeah, and even picking his brain. But it'll be interesting to see what it brings for the women's team as well as the men's kind of going forward, especially into the summer.
One man who is constantly mentioned in the same breath as Johnny Sexton is Rieko Ioane. This news that came through yesterday, again, I thought this news was a joke when I first saw it, but Rieko Ioane is going to join Leinster next season from the Blues. So this clause in his contract allows him to skip one Super Rugby Pacific season, 6-month period beginning in December of this year. Of course, Jodie Barrett has done this as well, but there was the famous comments from Ioane at full time in the Rugby World Cup game: enjoy retirement and don't miss your flight home. I think was the general sentiment. This is an interesting one.
It's a spicy one, isn't it? I had someone say in one of the WhatsApp groups saying, give him Johnny's locker, give him Johnny's parking space, the whole shebang. So yeah, I was the same as you. I was like looking at it thinking it was like a late April Fool's joke, but he's a brave man to come over. He'll have a lot of making up to do, and it might be a bit. I'm sure they'll welcome him with open arms, but you can imagine it being a bit frosty for the first while. But like he has big boots to fill in terms of coming over for Barrett as well, and what he's brought to the pitch for Leinster on and off the pitch. So yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure. It makes for an interesting headline this week. But I'm sure, like, look what he's done over the last few years with the All Blacks and in Super Rugby, like it definitely is going to strengthen Leinster. Missing Barrett and then being able to slot straight back in with Ioane, it's going to be interesting. But I think just the dynamic of what's gone on with Johnny and the Ireland team, it's going to make for interesting welcomes, and I'm sure he'll be welcomed with open arms, but it might be a bit frosty at first.
As a player, do you get a bit intimidated, or are you more excited when you see someone of like it's not every day someone like Ioane or Barrett comes over to our shores? But is there excitement in the camp, or is there a bit of like, to watch my back here, my position is
I suppose it depends on what place you're going for. Like the likes of Barrett, he can cover so many easier utility back, and Ioane's kind of the same. Like obviously started off within the wing and has moved to centre, so he does cover a lot of positions. So I suppose it depends. If you're a forward, you're like, class, this is great, welcome, how are you? But if you're a back, you mightn't be welcoming him as much with open arms. But I guess it's driving that level of performance, and I'm sure that a lot of the young players in Leinster, coming up through with the likes of the Tommy O'Briens, you see like how well he's linked up with Barrett, and even in play they're going to learn so much from him. So I suppose it's raising your game to try and match it if you're competing for positions, and seeing how far you can push it. But like he's not going to walk into that team straight away, so he'll have to earn his spot too. But yeah, I suppose there's a lot to be learned off him. But I suppose like that, if you're fighting for a jersey with him, you mightn't be as welcoming of him coming as others.
But that's the thing, isn't it? Like the Leinster will get criticism for moves like this, and the Jodie Barrett move as well. And you'll see other Irish provinces saying, "Oh, look, it's totally unfair. Leinster have an unfair advantage. They already have the financial advantage over the other provinces."
Yeah.
And then Leinster fans, I suppose, will point back and say, "Well, look, you all sign players too from outside, and block paths for other local players maybe getting jerseys." But what do you make of all that? The negative feedback, I guess, from some quarters for Leinster.
I know it's very hard, isn't it? You're going to hear it all the time, and I suppose, like how well Barrett's been playing, and you see I think the Snyman thing has added fuel to the fire, obviously with him coming from Munster, and how well that he's managed to keep injury free and go well at Leinster as well, which will irk the Munster fans that bit more. But yeah, it's a tricky one, I suppose. Like you're not going to be gifting anybody spots, so at the same time you're like, earn your spot, whether you're a homegrown player or not. So look, in terms of looking at it from the neutral point of view of making the games more enjoyable, I don't think there's anyone who could say that they don't enjoy watching the likes of Barrett or Snyman play when they're at full flow. I think they're given, like Barrett especially, given like another masterclass against Glasgow a couple of weeks ago. So there's nothing but enjoyment to watch them. I suppose if you're more, yeah, looking at your own team as to the unfairness that when you're going up against them, it's a bit of a different kettle of fish. But it's hard because there's pros and cons to both sides of it. You know, I'm in favour of it in terms of making the league better and kind of growing the league in that department. Same way the South African teams have come in and brought something different. It's kind of looking at it like that. Yeah, as you said, like, yes, the other teams have had their chance to bring in other players too, maybe with not the financial push that Leinster have had. But yeah, it just adds kind of more fuel to the fire for those interprovincial derbies and for the bite that comes with them that we'll have this weekend, no doubt, with the Leinster-Ulster game. But yeah, it's a tricky one because you can see where they're coming from in some extent, but then there's parts where you're just enjoying watching these players do their thing as well. So
on that game this weekend, it's obviously a massive game in Ulster season. They're in the race for the top 8, and I believe there's 6 at the minute, but there's only 3 points between them and like 14 places. It's mental.
Yeah.
But Leinster is very much a dead rubber. They're already qualified through the next round. They've bigger fish to fry at the minute. As a former Leinster player, are you looking at Ulster and saying, let's just ruin their season essentially because let's get one over them? Or are you saying, look, we'll rest our players, take it easy? Or you throw out Barrett, Snyman and just to spite Ulster?
Yeah, I think like probably over the last few years with the way things have gone for Leinster in terms of, you know, not winning any silverware, that's a big thing for them. And I think they're not going to want to take the foot off the gas in terms of any complacency or losing that momentum that they've had in performances. So yeah, you'll probably see a bit of rotation, I'm sure, to a certain extent. But then also there's people who want to put their hands up for grabs or, you know, put their hand up for the spots that might come in the matches to come in the run in as well, in the Champions Cup as well. So there's a lot to play for them. So I think they'll be putting the throat on poor Ulster, I think, from that point of view, that anybody who's playing is getting an opportunity to put a jersey on and put their hand up for selection for what's to come. So yeah, while there might be a dead rubber for them, they'll still be, you know, wanting to put on a performance for the Leinster fans as well and playing that same style of rugby. But I don't think they'll want to be taking any foot off the gas in terms of keeping that tempo and keeping that style of play and keeping the momentum, because it's something that over the last, you know, few years of having come away with, you know, no silverware, they definitely would want to be just foot in the throat every match they have, not taking anything for granted, even if it might be a dead rubber.
Could I ask you, with the Ioane move, we talk about the younger players benefiting from it massively, the likes of Tommy O'Brien or any of the academy lads coming through getting to train with Leinster week in, week out. Is there any players that aren't benefiting from it, say like a Jamie Osborne or a Jimmy O'Brien, that play similar positions to these players, play wing, play centre, and whether it's Jamie Osborne being moved onto the wing a lot with Barrett in, or Jimmy O'Brien not getting time on the wing because Hugo Keane's obviously Leinster's fullback going forward.
Yeah.
Is there any players that you're looking at going kind of, what about me?
Yeah, falling out by the wayside.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is like that's the worry that you have if you bring in a player like the calibre of Barrett or Ioane or Snyman, that, you know, where do these players land? Those players that have come up from the academy and done the grassroots pathway and have shown that they're able to play for Leinster at a senior level and have shown those kind of green shoots of what they can do. Obviously, they're going to be feeling probably the most pressure from it in terms of, you talked about just kind of looking over the shoulder going, oh God, I've made my inroads here, but I can't compete with that. So I suppose, like, I heard Leo Cullen being asked about it kind of earlier in the year in regards to Barrett, in terms of, are you going to play him or are you going to play Snyman in those big games, or are you being made by IRFU to put them on the bench for certain games, or what's the story? And he was kind of tight-lipped on that one. So you do see a bit of rotation between Barrett and Snyman in that department. But I think Leinster probably managed it really well in terms of, you see the likes of Mangan coming in for second row and getting to play alongside Snyman. So there is that bit of rotation given, where you've seen players come in and they've capped, you know, or given senior debuts like Tommy O'Brien.
Spicer and
that. They've integrated them well that way. Like, nothing is going to be gifted to you anyway in terms of getting to play and represent Leinster. So you got to earn your stripes there. But I think what we've seen there over the likes of Spicer, the likes of Mangan, the likes of even Oliver Coffey, they've been integrated in and gotten, like, you know, made their senior debuts within that squad. So I think Leinster, it's up to them now to manage it as well as they can. Not gift anything to Ioane, but not gift anything to anybody else either. That they'll integrate them well, like we've seen them dovetail it, but whether they have restrictions on when they can play the likes of Ioane, like they kind of have seen that rotation between Barrett and Snyman. I don't know if that's a kind of an unofficial thing or something that Leinster are just doing. We won't know, I suppose, because they'll remain tight-lipped on it. But I think it's been managed well in that sense. Like, there's nothing but to be gained off that. And you see the likes of, I think, Tommy O'Brien being prime examples in those tries in the build-up in the Glasgow match, of just that ability to play alongside him, and how it can elevate your game and just make you a better player all round is going to work tenfold. That when he does leave, all of a sudden they're up at that level and they can kick on from that. So it's a tricky one, but I think one that will be managed well by Leinster, I would say. Before
we let you go, Hannah, prediction for Sunday afternoon, 3 o'clock, Wales against Ireland, Rodney Parade.
Yeah, I had kind of said it during the week. I think Ireland, you know, by a score. I think Wales are buoyed by what they've done. That's the danger with watching Wales. They've been ticking along kind of in the background, just got beaten by Scotland week 1. Then last time out that they had their meeting with France, and they stayed in it with France up until half time. So that's the worry, is they can stay in it. They like to start quick.
Big pack as well.
Yeah, big pack, big units, and they've also had tricklings of players come back in. When you look at the Welsh kind of 1 to 23, it's a lot of the same names that we've seen over the last few years. So the experience is there. They've gotten the likes of Kelsey Jones back at hooker. I'd say she'll probably start. She's been eking her way back from a long-term injury. The same for Gwen Crabb. They'll also be looking probably to welcome back the likes of Alex Callender in the back row, and she's kind of, I think, a vice captain for them. But she's also someone like an Aoife Wafer that they'll have a good tussle there in the back row in terms of that grit at the breakdown. So that'll add for kind of interesting spice. But they will be looking to start quick. So Ireland, it's up to Ireland to kind of be able to match them in the forward battle, get the scrum, as you said, get that scrum and the set piece dominance that we've had against the likes of Italy, and that we've shown that we can have with the likes of the lengths of France. But yeah, Ireland are going to need to be in it for the full 80 minutes, because Wales won't die, especially not at home with that pride that's on the line. And as we said, they'll want to be avoiding the wooden spoon. So I'm going to say Ireland by a score. I think it will be tighter probably than we want it to be, but I'd hope that the girls can kind of bounce back and show the resolve to go again.
Okay. Enjoy the game, Hannah. Thanks a million
Cheers,
for coming
lads.
in. Great
Thanks,
insight,
mate.
as always.
Thank
Hannah
you.
O'Connor with us there at 8:37, approaching on Friday morning's Off the Ball Breakfast. And Off the Ball is in partnership with the Road Safety Authority to bring you this safety message as well. If you plan on drinking, book a taxi, arrange a lift, or use public transport. Plan ahead. Visit rsa.ie.